Amazing. Well, it's 9:02, so thank you all for joining us and welcome to this Language Matters webinar today. You are here with myself, Tara Dunne. I am the legal associate at Our Family Wizard, and I'm joined today with Emma Nash, who is the chair of the Family Law Language Project and a partner at Radon Solicitors. So the structure of today's webinar is that I'm shortly going to hand over to Emma, who's probably going to speak for around 20 to 25 minutes on the Family Law Language Project, the problems with language, what we can do to help our language in family law, and then she'll turn it over to me, who's going to talk through kind of how you can assist as a mediator with your clients' use of language. So I think without further ado, Emma, if you want to crack on, share your screen and kick things off. So yes, thank you all for joining and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for that, Tara. And yes, thank you all for joining us talking about language matters and use of language in family law. As Tara said, my name's Emma Nash, and I am going to share my screen now because I've got some slides to take you through, although I will say that this is a bit of a flexible one. We might spend a bit more time on some other points, and it's a subject that very much lends itself to discussion, so hopefully we'll have some time at the end. Okay, great. Okay, so language matters, and I'm going to jump straight into the Family Law Language Project. This is something that I set up not on my own, with help from a lot of lovely people a few years ago now, 2021. I say encouragement from family, that's Family Solutions Group. Encouragement is a nice word. They were very keen for me to take forward some articles I'd written about language, which is really me having a bit of a grumble about some of the terms that people were misusing, and actually trying to do something with it to improve the situation. Our mission is to help make family law easier to understand, less hostile and more accessible by improving the understanding and use of language. And we are looking to engage with people through our websites, social media and legal media, the wider media, and training and workshops such as this one. What is wrong with the language that we are using? Now, the Family Solutions Group is a subgroup of the private law working group. It was set up by Mr. Justice Cobb early 2020, and they were basically given the rather unenviable task of trying to work out what needs to be done to improve the family system. In late 2020, they published a report called What About Me? It's a very informative report. A lot of work went into it. It's not uplifting reading. There's a lot wrong with the system, and one of the things they identified was problems that we have with language in family law. Specifically, they identified 3 problems: that we use adversarial language. We talk about battles, winning, losing, fighting, warring parents. Justice is a word I struggle with, and I'll probably come back to, because it's a great word. It's a positive word. What is wrong with justice? But put it into the family law context of someone who's separating, and their concept of justice can actually be quite problematic. Incorrect use of language, including by the profession. We're getting it wrong. We're using outdated words. We're using words that don't help the situation. And that's something that needs to change. And general misunderstanding of terms. Common law spouse I put in there, and shared care as examples, because people hear these words and they think they know what they mean, and that informs their decisions and their understanding of the law and how they come to situations, either with solicitors or mediators or whoever, to try and solve those problems. They had, in relation to language, they had a core recommendation, which recommend the shift in language away from legal disputes towards a language of supporting parents to resolve issues together. Now, this is going to be over 3 years ago now. There has been a lot more work done on this, and I will come on to that later. But I wanted to talk a bit more about why this is so important. Why does language matter? Language can make people unable or unwilling to engage, particularly if it's too technical. I've put some examples here. I put Joey from Friends because I thought that might be something we've all, or a lot of us will be able to relate to. One episode in particular where he buys an encyclopedia, or one volume of an encyclopedia, and there are a few scenes where he's sitting there and his friends are all talking about something and he has no idea what's going on because he doesn't know anything about it, and he just nods along and smiles. He cannot engage. And that, I think it's very easy for people who work in family law, who've got that jargon, to forget that there were maybe people sitting there going, yeah, okay, I get that, who don't understand, particularly if they are our clients or people who the system is there to support. I've put military jargon in there. That's a bit of a personal thing for me. Husband's military, and when I first met him, I suddenly met all these military people, and I was the one sitting there going, yeah, what on earth are these things he's talking about? Because they very much like their jargon, and they like their acronyms as well, which is the next one. I put a lovely long list of ones there. I'm not going to try and read them all out. I do sometimes try to get through them all, but as you can see, it's another language, and some of them are quite important. I put a PGM, paternal grandmother, in there, who may very well be reading that document or sitting there listening to what's going on and not understand that that's how they're being referred to. Doesn't address people correctly, appropriately, or even politely. I remember talking to a court interpreter who said she felt very unable to engage as a professional in the courtroom because she was dismissed and she was referred to as interpreter, and that that impacted on her engagement and her doing a very, very important job. We also think about how we speak to people, how we address people generally. I haven't put the obvious one on this one, but dear sirs, my heart sinks when I see dear sirs at the top of a letter. For me, it shows you haven't given any thought as to who you're writing to, and that just sets the wrong tone for everything that you're going to say after that. It's outdated. Even if you knew you were writing to a firm that was only had men in it, I don't think it would be an appropriate way to start that letter, because it shows you haven't given it that thought, and you don't need to. There are lots of other options for doing that. We'll come on to some other options shortly. And it doesn't create an environment where people feel that they can and should be heard. I said it takes courage to say I don't understand in school, let alone in court. And again, it's that kind of feeling that you are in a space where if you don't have a full understanding, or everything is too formal, then you can't engage with it. And it's really important that the people who need to engage can. Language can put people at risk, particularly if it's wrong. And again, I'll come back to a couple of examples. Common law spouse, people coming and saying, oh, it's okay, I'm not married, I've been living with him for X plus years. It's like, well, actually, that's a term that you've probably read in the media that actually doesn't give you those rights. Also misunderstandings, put parental responsibility and lives with as two sort of things of people not necessarily understanding exactly what those mean, and the proper context for them, or thinking they do, and it's impacting how they approach something. This is probably the most important part of this whole my little bit of presentation, which is language can create, promote, or maintain conflict. Conflict can make it more difficult to resolve disputes, make out-of-court dispute resolution, such as mediation, less likely to work. And that is a really important issue if people who are coming to a family law problem with the ingrained understanding that there has to be a fight. By the time they're talking about mediation, they are so far into that mindset that the damage has already been done. Increasing legal costs and clogging up the court system. And most importantly, this gets a whole slide. Conflict damages families. We know this, we see it, but actually we've got the evidence to prove it. And this evidence is worth a read. You can find it online. It's at the DWP Reducing Parenting Programme. It's published 2021, so it's recent, relatively recent. And I've put this out. This is the finding that you will find. Strong body of evidence to show how damaging interparental conflict can harm a children's outcomes, even when the parents manage to sustain positive parent relationships. Put children at risk of having problems with school, peer relations, physical health, smoking, substance misuse, mental health, wellbeing challenges. These are not just problems in childhood, they will go on in later life: poor relationships, academic attainment, lower employability, heightened interpersonal violence, depression and anxiety. The conflict that we see is having lifelong effects, and not just on the children, on the people who we are involved with. We will, there will be a knock-on effect with the impact on the NHS, the people requiring more mental health support, more physical health support, the employability, people contributing to society. This is not a problem that we can confine to just the people that we deal with. This is something that I think is really important that we have to keep in mind, particularly as family law professionals. Family law and family court, arguably those are terms that I toyed with expanding in this slide alone. It's not there for lawyers or judges, social workers, CAFCAS. It's there for people, families and children that need it. And why is family law different? Again, just a few points to make us think about the fact that tax law, commercial law, corporate law, it's very different. We deal with very different issues, and we deal, law is traditionally adversarial and complex, and that's not necessarily right for the type of things and the people that we deal with. Those who need to understand what's going on are not lawyers, and sometimes they're children. We deal with people and families in crisis. Again, that's another really important thing to remember. We are not dealing with someone who needs to sue someone because of a commercial contract's gone. We are dealing with people's lives at a very, very difficult time. How we act professionally directly impacts those families and children we deal with. It directly impacts other professionals as well. And the solution is not always legal. And that's another reason why things like mediation are so important, because the answer isn't necessarily in the statute book. It can be something different, and it can simply be talking things out, getting past barriers. I've put some specific issues here. I won't dwell on these too much but these are generally things that are very good for discussion if people want to pick up on these and come back to them. So bad language. I could do a whole presentation on my views on how damaging custody is. It's something that custody as a word is been talking about this. It comes from hiding or guarding something, and it's very much someone has control over something and protect it. Now, there's some positives in that, but in a family law context, it's very much pitched at one person having it and one person not, or it being seen as maintaining control. The problems that can cause, I mean, even this week, I've had clients talk about, I need full custody. I need to be the one in control. We don't do that. We got custody. We got rid of it in 1991. I say I could talk about that particular word all day. Versus pitching people against each other. Primary carer, again, sometimes it's going to be totally appropriate to use that, but again, it's that pitching parents against each other. I'm the more important parent, you were secondary. It immediately creates a conflict. My opponent, how we engage with each other, seeing as that as being essentially a conflict. Position statements, arguably that's a difficult one to understand, and again, you're positioning people against each other. Are there better words we can use? Family justice, I've already touched on, that someone says, I want justice. So, well, we're here to find a solution for you and your family, not to arbitrate or not to adjudicate on how your relationship has ended and who, who was right and who was wrong. But again, people have different ideas of that. Other examples I'm sure you can think of. This is always an interesting one for people to throw things up. Language and solicitor correspondence. This is something that is, we'll talk a bit, and I know Tara will touch on, we'll talk on a bit more, but how we write and how we engage with each other can have a real impact on how a case goes and the conflict that either we can help diffuse or we can help perpetuate. So it's tricky. I still struggle with some of the language I use, particularly if you've been trained a particular way or are expected to write in a particular way by the more senior members of the firm. Rewards for fighting language. I put this in here particularly because we are thinking about mediation. And this is absolutely in no way to have a dig at barristers, but the way that we promote and reward for example, barristers, they need to get their hours down in court, they need to show their wins, they need to show that they are doing all the things that actually we do not want people to be doing, because we want them to be in mediation. And it would be great if we could find a way to get the recognition for the, and not just mediators, but for the people who keep people out of court in a similar way, as we reward the progression for, for example, up to Casey. Just some ideas there, because it's a very ingrained system. Perception of family law in the media, huge challenge that we have, because we get influences from other countries. Conflict is sexy. I put call the mediator here. Someone once mentioned that on I think a Twitter debate. And I love that idea of, you call the midwife when there's, the child coming, you desperately need them. We had some sort of similar concept. No one's going to tune into it though, because it's not sexy and dramatic. It's already too late. And again, that's very much people coming to us, when their relationship starts to break down. They've seen all this in the media, they're already starting to think, I've got to fight, I've got to battle, and that mentality is very difficult to move them away from, and the damage can already be done. How do we improve our use of language? Sorry, Tara, do you give me a heads up if I'm going on for too long?
You're all good.
Excellent. What can we do about it? This is another report by the Family Solutions Group. It was commissioned by Sir Andrew. I say it's worth a read, and not just saying that because I was one of the authors. A lot of work went into this, consultation with a wide range of groups and existing material that was out there, getting people's views on the language that we use, and what can be done to improve it. Ultimately, it boils down to recommendations using 5 Ps. That's plain English, avoiding legal jargon, personal, using family names rather than labels. I would probably go a little further and say, again, come back to the dear sir's point, think about who you're speaking to. It may be appropriate to be a bit more formal in that situation. Be proportionate, use language which is proportionate to the family issues being considered. And I think we can probably all think of some correspondence we've seen that has used entirely disproportionate language when you are ultimately trying to resolve a family problem, a legal problem. Problem solving, using constructive problem solving language, very much focusing on the solutions rather than who has done what wrong, or what issues need to be for example, are determined in a fact finding. Well, what is the solution? What gets us there? And then positive futures, again, not looking back on what has happened and who's done what. And it's remembering that we are not there to serve a particular person, their view of justice at the end of their relationship. We're there to solve a problem, and particularly if that relates to children. It's about managing people's expectations and using language that keeps that positive futures idea in mind. It provides examples of better language to use. So the report's got some glossaries at the back, and what I've said about using verses and position statement and all of that, it's got some examples. So it's worth having a look at if you think, well, what do I say instead of this? I'm not going to go through them, but there are examples of how to do that, and these are examples that have come not just from the people who were sitting down writing this report, but from the suggestions and from the ideas and from the problems that were being reported from in the consultation. Where to read more? I try and keep this updated. There's probably a lot more I can put in here, but these are actually links. But there's a lot going on about use of language. People are talking about it. It's being debated in Parliament. People are writing about it. And if you want to find out more, I put Family Solutions Group, Language Matters, the Reducing Parental Conflict up there. Obviously, the Family Law Language Project. Do have a look at our website. Please do follow us. And if you see anything in the media or elsewhere that you think we should be made aware of, tweet us, what do we call it now, excess, and let us know so that we can say, hey, there's a better way of doing it. It's not about shaming anyone or saying you're wrong. It's just about raising awareness and saying, you know what, actually, you don't need to talk about custody battles and warring parents. It's not helpful. It's a really important reason why we actually should be using different language. Final thoughts from me, think about the language that you use. It sounds simple. Once I really started analysing the language I use, it really made me think, and I've changed a lot of the things that I do in correspondence, in the way I operate. But I don't always get it right. It's difficult, particularly when we are dealing with the issues that we are dealing with in a stressful environment. So raise awareness and get involved. I say, please do give us a follow. And on that note, I have no idea how long that took me, Tara, but I will hand over to you.
No, that's perfect, Emma. Thank you. And it's interesting you talk about the media, because I'm not sure if you saw Sarah's comment in the chat, but she talks about how custody was used on Coronation Street. So prime example there. But on that note, if anyone does have any thoughts, questions, or anything like that, then please do feel free to put them in the chat. And I'm sure we'll have at least 10 minutes at the end. So thank you, Emma. I'm going to crack on then and share my screen. Going slightly kind of on the other end of the spectrum in terms of, obviously, Emma was talking through problems with the language that we're currently using as, I guess, say, professionals, but also kind of in the community we're in. But then I'm going to kind of run through kind of the clients that you're working with, the parents that you're working with, and how we can support their use of language. I will also pause and talk through, as Emma touched on, some of the kind of common correspondence that you might see either in your practice as a solicitor or as a mediator as well. So to start things off with, this is probably a message that you see day in, day out, whether that's, like I say, in your practice as a mediator or a solicitor, or if you're kind of dual qualified there, this is probably something in terms of the language that is being used between those co-parents, unfortunately, is currently the situation. In bold is language that didn't need to be used, of course. So, you know, when this language is used, it's going to be sent to the recipient co-parent. They're going to be, you know, fueled up by this language and probably respond in a similar vein. But of course, when we are dealing with co-parents, there is, of course, children involved, and there's always going to be issues about the children that do need to be resolved, which are usually engulfed in messages like these. And for reference, this was a real message sent before the co-parents started using the Our Family Wizard platform, which I'll touch on a bit later on. But as I say, once a message like this is sent, there is going to be that nasty language. There's also going to be key issues that do need to be resolved. So things such as requesting reimbursement. So here we've got, you know, you haven't paid me yet, or looking to schedule some extracurricular activities, or looking to swap some parenting time. But actually, the problems with this language that's being used is there's a lack of dates, there's a lack of timings, there's a lack of specifics. So there's also going to be delays and there's going to be confusions, which could potentially lead to further conflict as well with this language. Talking about these problems with the language, the other current problem that we have with regards to the development of technology is how easy that language can be manipulated. And I'm not sure how many of you on the call today know how that can actually be done, but it's very, very simple to manipulate communication, to manipulate language or what was said by another person. And in the context of co-parent communication, all they have to do is go onto Google, type in fake WhatsApp generator. This is iFake, so this is ifake.com, which you can find on Google as well. You can put in someone else's name, you can put in someone else's number, and put in a message that you want to make it look like came from that person. So this one on screen now is, I want to make it look like Jamie is threatened to take the children out of the country. And if this plays and carries on, seems to be pausing, you can actually get specific with how it looks. So actually, what's my battery level? What's my phone provider? Do I have Bluetooth on? Really to make it look like it came from someone's phone. And what you get then is this on screen now. And all I had to do was go onto Google, takes me about 30 seconds to a minute to get a manipulated screenshot of the language that I want to make it look like Jamie had sent me, which I think is absolutely insane that this can be done in a matter of minutes. You know, you don't have to be a tech whiz, you just go onto Google. Other ways that a language can be quite severely manipulated is with WhatsApp. So there's a recent update to WhatsApp where you can now send messages, wait for them to be read by the recipient co-parent, and then go back and edit it. So I'm not sure why these videos are slightly delayed, but what it's representing is a particularly nasty abusive message. So let's just take the one that we saw a couple of moments ago in that iMessage. And you can wait for that to be delivered with, the 2 normal grey ticks, then 2 blue ticks as read. And then you can actually highlight that. You can see that screenshot on the left-hand side, click edit and change it to a much nicer message. And there's no previous record of that abusive, nasty language that was originally sent. So something to be aware of, because it's just so easy to manipulate that nasty language. And then a last example on the fun and games of technology that we have today is actually removing the language completely. And so with iOS 16, and I found out yesterday that this has actually been in force a year now. So iOS 16 was January 2023. So with iMessage, you can actually send messages, wait for them to be read, and then highlight that message, click undo send, and then that message vanishes. And we have a cybersecurity expert out in the US who previously was, as part of his role, actually tried to recover the messages, whether they're in cache or the data. And this is actually the iMessage that he can't recover. So he can't actually recover undo messages on iOS 16. So as you saw, you can actually potentially safeguarding concerns actually. So that message, of course, was, I want to make it look like, or I want to alert Jamie that I'm going to threaten to take the children out of the country, which I know Jamie has seen, but then I've removed any evidence of that language that I have sent it. So again, something to be aware of with the fun and games of technology and how that can actually be used to remove, manipulate language. So I just wanted to touch on quickly, because I'm sure you're probably thinking, is this happening? Do parents actually manipulate language? Do they try and make it look like that, things weren't said or things have been edited? And I'm sure everyone on the call has had some sort of that experience. But with regards to actually completely manipulating screenshots of messages, it is actually happening. So particularly for any solicitors on the call, but also for mediators to be aware, is we had this quote from His Honour Judge Clive Baker, where he had the case, a public law case, where there was actually a screenshot from a professional that made it look like they had confirmed a really important appointment for that case. But it transpired that whilst it looked genuine, as you saw a couple of moments ago using iFake, it wasn't real. It was manipulated using one of those mock-up sites that you can find on Google, and there was no trace of that message. So getting to the Our Family Wizard platform itself, and the reason we kind of give context to that is to actually show how easy language can be manipulated, but also the current platforms that in a way can facilitate that nasty abusive language, but also wanting to kind of focus on those key issues about the child. And that's, of course, why everyone in this call, whether you are a mediator or not, want to help parents resolve their issues outside of the court process in what we hope is a more amicable way. Our Family Wizard in a way helps that, because it's a co-parent platform that completely safeguards against that manipulation, but the hope being that actually focuses on removing that communication, actually focusing on the other features of the platform where actually messaging doesn't actually need to happen. So kind of removing that uncertainty, removing that potential conflict to have those disagreements or confusions or disagreements. So I'm going to briefly run through the features just to show you how really the language is focused on trying to remove those kind of uncertainties. First of which is messaging. So of course, if they do need to message, then that is an option. The difference being, to compare that with the current communication platforms that we have, is that when messages are sent, they can't be edited or deleted. So there is a permanent record of that message on the platform, alongside accurate timestamping. So the date and time that message was sent and the date and time that was first viewed by the recipient co-parent as well. You can, include attachments and things like that. And it really just is a familiar format of communication for the parents, essentially an informal version of email. Some of you might be familiar with the tone meter. So this is probably it's essentially a helpful language tool, which provides real-time feedback for parents as they're typing messages. So it helps them with the language that they're using. So it flags up anything that could be seen as potentially inflammatory or offensive. So if they do want to say something that could be seen as potentially concerning or aggressive, as is on screen in this example, Tone Meter will flag that up to them. You can see those red bars within that grey banner, and it will alert them what that message could be reciprocated as, how that person could feel if they sent that message. So why are you so bad at being on time? Tone Meter is saying that that could be seen as potentially aggressive to the recipient co-parent. A couple of things to note about Tone Meter is that it won't stop the parent from sending that message if Tone Meter has been alerted, raised, activated, whatever that might be. So they're more than welcome to press send on any message. It won't alert Taylor in this example that they've been sent an aggressive message, a concerning message, or that Tone Meter's been activated. And it also won't provide, let's say, myself as the writer of this message with any alternatives. Whilst, of course, we like them to change their language, if it is, of course, aggressive or potentially inflammatory, we're not there to interfere with the language that they're using, purely there as a guide, in the hope that they do change their language, in the hope that they do make it more child-focused. So kind of pausing on the co-parent front and looking at some correspondence that we've put into the Tone Meter, and I have to give full credit to Emma with regards to picking out certain phrases that I understand she has previously received in correspondence. So taking the first example, and I'm sure some of you on screen have had something similar sent to you in correspondence. So the first example is, we do not wish to raise your client's conduct, but if an agreement cannot be reached, then our client will be forced to bring such matters to the attention of the court. Tone Meter is saying that this could be seen, if sent, it could be seen as potentially upsetting to the recipient co-parent. Well, not co-parent, it'd be the other solicitor or the other legal professional in that matter. So it's really interesting because we've got a few examples, and each example that Emma wanted to put into the Tone Meter always flagged up one way or another. Second example, we are outraged at your suggestion that our client has acted inappropriately. Tone Meter is saying that that could be seen as potentially aggressive if sent. So that's how potentially that person could be feeling if you sent that message, that email, that letter. I trust you have advised your client that the application will inevitably fail. Upon sending that message, that email, that letter, that could be seen as potentially humiliating. So in terms of how Tone Meter works, it's a really intelligent algorithm that was created to, as I say, help parents with the language that they're using, getting them to think about the language that they're using before they press send, in the hope that they do decide to change their language, make it more child-focused, and remove any potential disagreements that they might have. And for reference, it works on context. So if we think of a swear word that can be used in both a negative and positive context, it will only flag up in that negative context and not that positive context. So calendar, I think, is really important to actually avoid any potential disagreements with regards to their language, which could be quite emotionally fueled, if there is kind of disagreements or inaccuracies or whatever that might be with regards to both parents, parenting arrangements, and their kind of discussions around that. So I think having that calendar is really useful, that shared calendar available for parents to both essentially be on the same page to avoid any of those disagreements. There's common rotations, there's common templates that they can choose from. So if you are in that mediation session and you're drawing up that parenting plan or putting into a table or whatever that might be, their agreed parenting arrangements, they can then reflect that on the platform. For reference, and I'll touch on this very, very briefly a bit later on, but if you are a mediator who wants access or to overview the parents' kind of activity on the platform, you can actually upload the schedule for them as well. So when you're connected to both parents, you have a lot more kind of access to the platform to assist them with their co-parenting arrangements. Of course, there's going to be other templates and rotations, and if none of those work for them, then there is that custom option. They can add in handover times, get really specific as to what has been agreed in the mediation. I really like this feature. So this has been recently updated. It's a schedule change request. So if there is any kind of last minute work commitments, if there's any, Nana's birthday party, but it's falling on the other co-parent's time, this is a really great way for them to request a swap, a one-time swap or change to that parenting schedule. So they can put in a reason for why they're looking to make a change. So in this example, it's, I'd like to bring Nina, my daughter, to my sister's party so that she can see her cousins. I'd make this request, I'd put in the request of when I'm looking to spend time with Nina, and if I'm able to offer up some time in exchange. So in this example, it's I'm looking to have responsibility for the child. I'd like to have parenting time with the child on Saturday and Sunday, 4th and 5th of February. But in exchange, we can offer up the following weekend. So purely a swap there, but it could be just requesting the other parent to take some of my parenting time because I have that last minute work commitment. I'll have to put in that reason, and then once that's sent, the other parent can approve, decline. If it's approved, it automatically updates in that parenting schedule for them. So really, I think focusing here on specific dates, facts and times to avoid that confusion, to avoid kind of any potential disagreements. Then we have the journal that's split up into moments and check-ins. Moments is essentially an isolated social media for that family, uploading important memories, events, birthdays, whatever that might be, and they can share that with whoever they want on the platform. So whether it is yourself as a mediator connected to the parents, or if they want to share it with a third party such as grandma or a step parent, then that's completely up to them. You can see there the date and time that moment was created and the date and time it was first viewed by the recipient co-parent as well. So the next part of the journal is the check-in feature. So here they can actually tag a location, provided they're within 150 meters of that location. So let's say that they've taken the child, to the beach for the weekend, and they want to alert the other co-parent that they've arrived safely. They can actually drop a pin, as I say, provided they're within 150 meters of that location, to alert the other co-parent that they arrived there at that date and time. You can see on screen they have to provide consent access for the platform to access that. But yeah, really great feature. Here, of course, it's tagging the dentist, as Nina has a dentist appointment. If there is potential kind of safeguarding concerns, which probably wouldn't usually come up in a mediation, but this has been used if there is, normalisation orders, or one parent needs to go to a certain location at a specific date and time, and it's been used for that as well. For reference, this doesn't kind of log any tracking or anything like that. So Taylor can't go in, say 3 days later and see where Sam is. It's a one-time location pin that they can drop to represent and prove essentially that they were there at that date and time. Penultimate feature is the information bank. So you can see down the left-hand side all the different sections that they can upload information to. Again, I think this really comes down to ensuring that both parents are on the same page. It really does just save, one parent messaging, what's the child's dentist contact information, or, what's their medical history, or when was the last time they took their X medication. So I think this is really useful to, again, avoid communicating, avoiding any potentially inflammatory language being used to obtain this information. If, of course, one parent feels that they should be up to date with as regards to this information, this is a great way for that to happen and ensure both parents are on the same page. So, of course, health section really important for obvious reasons, whether that is one parent needing to call an emergency dental appointment or does need a child's medical history for whatever reason. The other example I wanted to provide was the family vitals. So this is really useful, and I think Elaine might be on the call, so I have to give full credit to her for this example. I'm sure a majority of you on the call know Elaine Richardson. When I did a parent-facing tutorial with Elaine, she provided the example in one of her mediations where there was a disagreement when a father bought the wrong size slippers for Christmas. And as I understand, Elaine, and apologies if I have got this wrong in any way, but there was a disagreement following that. The other parent was really mad that they they couldn't buy a present that was reflective of the child's accurate shoe size for that Christmas present. And I think something like this would really just avoid any kind of, nasty language being used and things like that. If they were just both on the same page with regards to shoe size, trouser size, dress size, whatever that might be, and then it avoids having that communication or, any potentially inflammatory language, because, the child might, break their school shoes, for example, and they need to buy new ones, or same for shirt, trouser, whatever it might be. If they just want to buy a new dress for the child for their birthday, I think this is, again, really useful to ensure that both parents have access to the information. And then lastly is the expense log. So again, avoiding, kind of demands of, you haven't paid that child maintenance, you haven't paid your split for the football training or violin lessons or whatever that might be. They can put that request on the platform, and again, removing that potentially inflammatory, nasty language. And again, just ensuring that everything is recorded, everyone is on the same page. So this is just the kind of overview slide of the expense log. So you can see dates requests were created, expense names, details of those, what the status is, does it need a response, has it been approved, refused, does it need to be paid, has it been paid, and things like that. And they can just create an expense and put all those details, specific dates and numbers if they click that create expense button at the top left. If an expense is approved, then they can just use their normal method of payment and then document that on the platform. So yeah, really, really useful feature to keep a record of both shared but also personal expenses as well with regards to the child. So kind of going full circle then with regards to the message we saw at the beginning, which was particularly nasty. The hope being that actually the platform can facilitate a removal in some respects to that nasty language. Of course, I'm not sitting here naively that, this is going to completely change people's behavior and completely remove the nasty language that they're using, but actually put a focus back on to the child, focusing on those key issues about the child. So for example, if they do need to request a reimbursement, then they can do that using the expense log and putting an emphasis on those specific dates, facts, and times. If it is, looking to schedule some extracurricular activities, they can use that events function within the calendar. Again, who's picking up, who's dropping off, is there any notes to remind the other parent of, here in this example, bringing the swim bag and towel. Again, all that history is recorded on the platform. And if they do need to swap some parenting time, then they can do that as well using that schedule change request. So just touching very briefly on the reporting functions. So if anyone on the call acting as kind of a legal professional or a neutral professional, whatever that might be, if you did ever need a record of any of the messages, for example, the schedule change requests, or the journal activity, expense log, whatever that might be, both parents and professionals connected to the parents can access those. You can get specific filter, search term, whatever that might be on all of those different reporting functions. And then purely for security reasons, parents have access to their own and only their own sign-in history and IP address history as well. So just touching on the pricing, which I haven't already. So for a standard subscription, it's a subscription-based platform, is £79 per parent per year. And then the tone meter is the only additional feature, which is an additional £8 per parent per year. That's all on the basis that a parent can afford that. So if they can't afford that because they're receiving legal aid, receiving government benefits, help with court fees, or just genuinely on low income, or you're doing some sort of pro bono work, then we provide the platform for free for those. And that's through our financial hardship form on screen now. So if parents want to fill this out themselves, or if you want to pass this on to a parent to fill out, then it's steps 1 and steps 2. If the parent fills it out, they'll need to submit some sort of evidence. So that's all outlined in steps 2 there. But if you want to fill this out on their behalf, and this could be whatever role you're in, so whether it is a mediator, whether it is a solicitor, whatever that might be, you can fill this out on their behalf by filling in steps 1 and steps 3. The difference between yourself and the parent filling it out is that you don't need to submit any evidence. So if you deem them necessary because of financial need, that they require a free account to utilize the platform, then it's very much judgment based. So it's on your judgment to fill that out. Whether it's the parent or yourselves filling it out, send that off to customer support info@ourfamilywizard.co.uk, and those free accounts will be set up. Just to make you aware, there's also a tick box if both parents require a free account. So you'd normally put it in on behalf of one parent, but if both need it, then you can just tick that box as well. And we've recently updated this to represent how many we've provided over the past 5 years. So we've granted 32,000 internationally fee waivers, which I think is incredible to think that, we're able to help so many families, whether they can afford it or not. And that really just kind of goes to the heart of the mission of the company. So please do use as many as you want. For reference, we cover the cost of these ourselves. They're not subsidized by the government or anything like that. And you can tell by the number they're granted very liberally. So yes, please do use them as and when you need to. And I think a follow-up email, I'm sure Helen will correct me if I'm wrong, should be going out shortly afterwards. So if anyone does need this, then I'm sure that can be sent out. Otherwise, I've got my email at the end of the slideshow. Right, just a couple more things before we finish up then. I've already touched on professional accounts, but for reference, any legal professional, any professional working with separated families, mediators, social workers, whoever is working with that separated family can create a free professional account, and that essentially allows you to overview the activity of that parent, provided they consent to that. And only the parent that you're requesting to overview would need to consent. So both parents don't need to consent unless you want to overview both of those parents. The idea being it controls your inbox, you can see the whole picture, you can provide that support when needed, and you can also download those reports as and when you need to. So just very lastly then, just so we have a couple of time for questions at the end, is the language that's being used in court orders where Our Family Wizard is included. And I very much recognise we're in Family Mediation Week, but I thought this is useful to touch on because actually, if you are drafting up kind of parenting plans or parenting agreements in your mediation, it's actually quite nice to see how some of the language can be included in that with regards to how they might utilise Our Family Wizard. So this is for reference to draft order template. And again, you might want to use this in whether that is your practice as a solicitor, but also can be used and can be taken to be used in parenting plans and parenting agreements. So just to kind of provide some of the highlights of this, if the slideshow wants to move, oh, there we go, is kind of parents subscribing within 10 days of the order, providing exclusive communication to those with regards to child arrangements, getting specific with some of the kind of different features and functions as how they might want to utilize that. Do they want, to use that calendar feature to arrange agreed variations? And I think this is really key, which is the 7th one down, is use messaging feature when information cannot be conveyed in the calendar, journal expenses, info bank features, which I briefly touched on at the beginning, where actually the hope is that they can actually arrange all the child arrangements without potentially even discussing, because they can, arrange those child arrangements through the calendar or, you know, sharing information with regards to the family in the info bank. So actually reducing the amount of messaging between those parents. And then professional access as well, so if that does need to be mandated. So the first one I wanted to touch on, and this is purely because the judge in this case actually touched on the language in this case, where it was actually described as poor and that it must improve for the child's sake, and that it is the potential conflict which may cause harm. So in this case, the judge did order the parents to use our family wizard to communicate, and expected each party to communicate in that medium only. So if there is any safeguarding concerns, it's increasingly being used in non-molestation orders. So here the judge outlined that the respondent must not communicate except through the Our Family Wizard app, but also got specific again. So, you know, only for the making of arrangements for contact, and only for sharing information which is necessary for the child's welfare. And then as we do more and more training for the judiciary, they actually specify to the use of tow meter now. As I mentioned, that's the only additional kind of feature to the platform. So that does need to be specified. And as I hope you saw, it can be a really useful function to help those parents with their language. And then my favorite one at the end is, here we go, is where both parents actually agreed to use the platform, but both parents actually got really specific as to how they wanted to kind of use the platform, the issues that they wanted to discuss with regards to those children. So academic performance, social behaviour, emotional welfare, holidays, trips, extracurriculars. So I think this is a really useful example where actually, if you are in that mediation and they are discussing using the platform, then they can actually outline exactly what they want to utilise the platform for. And yeah, this is probably my favourite example, albeit in a court setting. And then my penultimate slide, which is a really exciting kind of announcement, is that we recently collaborated and are on the cusp of launching a parenting plan. So this is in collaboration with the NACCC. A lot of work has gone into this. And Emma, I'm not sure if you knew about this. I think maybe you did. But yeah, really great resource. And if anyone does want this when we do launch, then please do get in touch. It's an amazing resource that we hope is going to help lots and lots of families going through that mediation process. For reference, it can be utilised alongside parents using the platform or independently as well. It's going to be a free resource, and yeah, if I don't say so myself, it's really brilliant. So yeah, keep an eye out for that when we launch, which should hopefully be very soon. And that is me with 5 minutes to go, which is great. And I can see the chat has got a few kind of comments and maybe questions in there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But that's my email number if anyone does want to get in touch. But as I say, I think there might be a follow-up email going out afterwards. So thank you all for listening. I'm just going to review.
I've been seeing what's been going on in the chat.
Amazing.
Thank you for all your comments. If I can just jump on a couple of them really quickly.
Yes, please do.
We've had one saying about the first letter that goes out. I think so Sarah Manning said that people come to them and they've had that first letter and it's not helpful. There is actually a draft first letter of how not to do things and a better in the Language Matters report as an example how to do that better. The other point that Sarah made was that the lawyers who really need to hear this aren't on this type of talk, and how do we address that? And that's a really big question. It's one of the things that the Family Law Language Project is thinking about, and particularly when we do this talk and give this training to young professionals, to young lawyers. An element of it is going to be leading by example. We are not going to change the profession overnight, and we are not going to convince everyone who is doing it wrong to suddenly do it right. but it's about looking at your own language, leading by example. One of the things I do usually talk a bit more about is picking up the phone and talking to each other. And I know that that can be intimidating, particularly if you are more junior, but if you are prepared, if you make your notes, it is another person on the other phone. Usually it's someone who, whilst they represent the other party, you will be, in a sense, be working with. And if you feel that you are called or you are put on the spot, it's okay to sort of handle that and say, well, actually, I need some time, I need to take instructions, I need to think about that. But having that communication outside of the written word can make all the difference to helping you work together to help solve the problems for your respective clients. And I think leading by that example it is going to help, as well as we're raising awareness and doing these talks and doing these trainings, which we do for so we can go into specifically into firms and talk a bit more about the written correspondence and things like that. So there are things, it's not going to happen overnight, but there are things that we can do. I don't know if I think Tara mentioned an email going around. Perfectly happy to share the slides and the resources.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for joining. I think, Emma, we've covered everything in the chat, and I'm sure Helen would have told me by now if I was mistaken with regards to that email going around. But I think that is true. So yes, thank you all for joining. I hope you found that somewhat informative. Enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, look out for an email and we can send any follow-up material in that. So thank you so much, and take care. Speak to you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.